Weight is about three things: the right nutrient ratios in, the wrong foods out, all for the individual, and the removal of blocking factors, things that cause disease, especially toxins and pathogens. Nearly every woman will deal with hormonal problems at some point in her life, and this topic is key to her success. Advice I give women struggling to regain their health is put yourself first. Work only with the best people. Be patient, but be firm in your commitment. Expect surprises and changes in direction. Be willing to heal your whole self, mind, body. That was written by my guest today, Julie Donaldson, Julie, I just loved that. I had to share it with the listeners because I appreciated those words so much. And it's just so true. If I could tell every woman that, I would. Julie is a veteran of the healing arts, practicing for 4 decades. She's a clinical nutritionist practicing metabolic nutrition, functional health testing, and health care, body work, and mind-body relationships. She works with all types of health conditions and dysfunction, as she sees that there are a set of core root causes of all illness with an infinite array of individual expressions. She seeks to understand the intersections and treat each person as an individual. You can find her at truenaturehealthconsulting.com. Welcome, Julie Donaldson, to the podcast.
Thank you, Karen. So good to be with you.
Oh, and I really liked what you had to say there, because we're in this quick fix society right now, and women are just like, it's like they're scrambling around trying to find the answers to their hormone issues. And I was just talking to my assistant today, and she said, you need to go on this Facebook page for women about hormones. And she said, it's brutal what people are talking about, and the advice they're being given. You got to go on there. And I said, Jessica, I've been on that page and I had to leave because it was so overwhelming. I wanted to scream through the page. You guys are being told the wrong information about your hormones. Like, and
Yeah.
you get it. And so today we're going to be talking about something that's really, really important, is estrogen toxicity. That is a huge issue in our environment. We were just talking before we hopped on that, women will start these hormones and they start gaining weight and they don't understand what's happening. And a lot of it is because they're already estrogen toxic with these fake estrogens that are in our environment. So I want to just start with, how the heck did you get into estrogen toxicity and into this realm? Because you were a massage therapist. She lived in Boulder just like I did. I went to the Rolf Institute. Julie went to the massage therapy school. So what year was that? Imagine if we were the same years.
Oh, I was there in 1981,
Okay, no, farther back. I
82.
was like
So
2002.
what I have to tag on to that comment is I was only 10 when I
Yes, of
started.
course. Yeah, you're so young.
It was a long time ago. And what got me into everything healing arts was personal struggle. The massage therapy actually started as a response to massive grief in my life. I lost 3 significant people in 5 months and was
Wow.
just immobilized with grief and couldn't move it until this beautiful young woman at a hospice program that I decided to intern with said, I'd like to give you a massage, first ever massage in my life. And the grief just began to peel away. And that's when I understood the profundity of the mind-body relationship and knew that I was on a track for a PhD in psychology.
Oh,
And
wow.
so completely went another direction into the healing arts, and then went through a number of years of major health struggle of my own. And so the specific estrogen connection and my interest in this work and this topic in particular related back to a lot of the problems that I was having. I had very severe endometriosis. I had mitochondrial dysfunction. I grew up in Central Florida in the middle of citrus groves that were being sprayed every other day with pesticides.
Right.
Literally, the house sat right in the middle of a big grove, and I started to get very sick. It really affected my reproductive system. I had my first child was born very prematurely. Then I just continued to have some issues, with other things in my system. And I started to research this, and this was before I got heavily into nutrition and functional care. I was just trying to deal with my own health and started to understand what these toxins had been doing to my body for several years, living in that space. And started to work. Fortunately, after lots of medical attention and discarding, just no one seeing that this was a real issue, the you're fine kind of a story. Started to work with someone who was very knowledgeable and started to help me turn my health around. So I've looked at this issue with women for decades now. And unfortunately, we're only getting into worse territory with all of the threats that we're all up against.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the little bit of history on how this came to pass.
Explain the difference between estrogen dominance, which is like this word, this phrase that gets chucked around. I think every woman out there thinks she's got estrogen dominance and way too much estrogen itself inside her body. I always say I've got this blog post about estrogen dominance on I wrote probably 5 years ago. It's still the most visited page on my blog, is because everybody thinks they have it. There's a difference, though, between what estrogen dominance is, true estrogen dominance, and estrogen toxicity. So can you explain that?
Sure. It's actually fairly simple.
Yeah.
Estrogen dominance is too much estrogen. It's excess. We should have certain percentages, and we should be within certain ranges with healthy and unhealthy estrogens, and we have both. So estrogen dominance is when we're overproducing, or we have too much influx of estrogenic and xenobiotic molecules coming into the body. Estrogen toxicity, which and they can feel a lot alike, which is why a lot of women say, oh, it's all about the estrogen. Well, it might be, but it may not be the estrogen dominance that women are considering that they have. Estrogen toxicity can exist actually with estrogen deficiency. You can have low healthy estrogen and still be estrogen toxic. So what it means to be estrogen toxic is all estrogens, whether they are the healthy ones or the unhealthy ones, have toxic metabolites. And those metabolites have to be broken down and detoxified in the body. And we have a couple of very significant pathways that's done through in the body. First is the CYP1A1, and second is the COMT. We can talk a little bit more about those. But that's the basic difference. Our bodies have to be able to break down these toxic metabolites. Final stage is actually methylation. A lot of people say, what is methylation? It is the addition of a methyl group to a fat-soluble toxin in order to break it down and make it so that it can be excreted from the body effectively.
Perfect. Yes. Yes. And estrogen dominance, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have too much of your own estrogen. It can just be simply, like you said, the ratio. It could be that you have low estrogen, but in comparison to things like progesterone, it's too much in comparison to that
Mhm.
progesterone. And I think that's where a lot of people are mistaken, or they get confused, or they don't understand that part, which is that it's not always that you have too much. It can just be a ratio problem between the two. So when it comes to the estrogen toxicity, where is that toxicity coming from? Is this our own estrogen, or is this environmental estrogens, or both?
It's both. It's both, right? Yeah. So the environmental issues are I call these the P toxins: perfumes, pesticides, petrochemicals, and plastics, huge, PFAS. These are all toxins that have xenobiotic qualities. They are endocrine disruptors, okay? And they take the body into a space of A, having to process them through some of these same pathways, and B, they are using up cofactors that may already even be diminished in the body, not at full supply. And it's like a case of mistaken identity. Okay, they come in and the body is perceiving their estrogenic qualities, and it's disrupting the whole brain, pituitary gland, sex hormone balance in the body, adrenal glands as well, obviously. So it is both our own estrogens. So say you take all these P toxins out of the picture, and you've got a woman who lives in some unknown clean territory, not being exposed to any of these
So not
things.
on Earth.
Not on this planet that I'm able to identify. But her pathways are not working properly. She may be producing a normal amount of estrogen, and it may even be in balance with her progesterone and her testosterone, her androgenic hormones, pardon me. But if these two pathways are not functioning properly for her, and or she's been depleted or has a preset vulnerability to low cofactors, okay, because some of her other methylation pathways don't work well, and they tend to just spin and spin and spin, using up cofactors, or she's not getting them in her diet or supplementation at adequate levels, then she is still at risk of becoming estrogen toxic, simply because these pathways are not breaking down those toxic metabolites and methylating them and getting them out of the body. Okay.
Okay, so what are some of these cofactors, and what influence does our genetics have on these detox pathways, the CYP1A1, 1B1? If we have certain genetic SNPs, is this going to influence our ability to get rid of these toxins, or can you still have these problems even if you don't have specific SNPs that can cause those issues, if that makes sense?
Well, sure you can, because let's bring this woman back into the real world. The one where she is exposed to all of these other compounds that are so stressful to these pathways. If she is overexposed, overburdened by all of these things, even if she doesn't have a genetic predisposition to failure in these pathways, yes, she can absolutely still become estrogen toxic. Okay. But I would say the majority of and certainly educated women who are understanding that they have to reduce their exposure and their risks to these P toxins, okay, it is the majority of the time that there is some genetic predisposition, okay. But what's the big deal about genetic predisposition? It's epigenetics. Okay. And this is what we talk about all the time, right? It doesn't really matter, if you will. It matters because a woman needs to pay attention, right? And know that she has this vulnerability. But if she's looking at all of the epigenetic influences in her life and giving her body the best opportunity through the healthiest practices, okay, to address these weak points, then it's not that big of a deal. Healthy epigenetic influences turn those genetic switches off. I have a genetic report full of ugly stuff.
Yeah.
Ugly stuff. And it was expressive during those bad years in my life. It was all
Right.
turned on, okay? But it's all turned off now. I'm 63 years young and, just very, very healthy, don't have any of these problems anymore because I've learned how to influence them. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cofactors.
Cofactors. Yeah. What are the cofactors? So, and let's toss in the conversation of synthetic hormones, birth control,
Yes. Yes,
etc.
absolutely.
Okay. Because obviously this lovely little pressure falls on women by and large to manage. And this is another big deal because these hormones not only are endocrine disrupting as well,
Yes.
but they also deplete cofactors, especially B vitamins. Okay. And B vitamins are an absolutely necessary component for methylating, whether you're talking about hormones or any other toxin. Okay. So, B vitamins are a big one, folate, B12. I always toss out a little word of caution. Don't anybody go take a huge amount of folate. We need to understand if you're an over methylator or an under methylator when we're choosing, an approach to something like that. Same with B12. Sometimes we have to go with different forms of B12. So I always need to just put that caution out there.
Yeah.
Some people get really sick on too much folate. SAMe, S-adenosyl methionine, is another cofactor that is absolutely critical to the COMT pathway. Glutathione is another big one. And all of these are compounds, again, cofactors that can be depleted over time if we don't get enough of them, if we're not getting it through diet or supplementation, or we are recirculating toxins over and over and over again, which, by the way, can happen with estrogen as well.
Yes. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
about that as it relates to the gut at some point. But glutathione is a big one because it supports the prevention of the buildup of some cytotoxic compounds that can happen through estrogen conjugation. So these are the big ones. Okay, zinc is another one, and a caution also that I have is a lot of women are getting information that the only diet that is appropriate when there are hormonal problems are plant-based diets.
Not on this podcast.
Okay.
Don't worry, Julie.
Yeah.
You can see you looking at me like, oh, am I going to
No,
Okay.
no, not looking at you. I just have to always utter that caution because we don't know who's listening,
Yep. Yes.
And you will have brand new listeners who are getting this information, and it's very damaging. Another complicating factor with estrogen toxicity is copper toxicity. And vegetarian diets feed copper toxicity. They're low in zinc. And zinc is the antagonist to copper. Hormone replacement and birth control also create excess estrogen. All synthetic hormones increase estrogen reception. all of them. Doesn't matter if it's progesterone or testosterone and not estrogen, they still increase estrogen reception. Estrogen and copper feed each other. So a
Yeah.
lot of women who are estrogen dominant or estrogen toxic, or think they are, I should say, we don't know yet that they are copper toxic.
Yeah.
And it may be the bigger problem than the estrogen, although the estrogen is always going to be some level of a problem in that situation because they feed each other.
Yeah, I know copper was really on my radar for a bit. So I went and got my copper levels tested. I got the ceruloplasmin tested, which is the protein that binds to copper. And I got my zinc levels checked because I didn't do a hair analysis test because my hair was so short at the time. But there is copper deficiency too, which can wreak havoc on us and cause problems with our iron. And so these things they really do have to be in balance with each other. Like too much is not good. It's that we need the Goldilocks, right? We can't have too little, we can't have too much.
That is one of my favorite references. It's all about the Goldilocks balance.
Yeah. I had Dr. Robert Selig come on. Do you know him?
Of him. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's great. He went through copper toxicity on the podcast, and it was really, it was one of the very popular podcast episode, but he breaks it all down, and he himself had copper toxicity. And it's the relation with estrogen is like, they're hand in hand. So I think it is important to do you do hair mineral analysis?
Always.
Yeah.
Always.
I got the kit to get started on it, like as a practitioner. And then I was like, oh, I need to take a course on how to interpret these. So I just haven't done it yet, but I really see the value in it.
Yes. And it's an inexpensive and effective way to look at, excuse me, toxic burden and excretion patterns. For me, and yes, you can see, some of those mineral issues like copper and zinc and obviously calcium, magnesium, all of those things matter. I always take hair analysis and I bump it up against blood analysis. I want to see what the intersections are. I want to see what the differences are, because they inform each other in ways that are helpful in terms of developing protocols. But yes, I always do nutrition. I always do hair analysis, and then it's, and blood pretty much. And then it's a question of, what are the other red flags, concerns, symptoms that are going on, obviously.
And as well, you do Dutch test, right? The urine metabolite test.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And those just all go, oh, that's a nice little package right there. Throw in the GI map and we've got ourselves the full spectrum.
There you go. There you go. And that is an incredible set of tests to have as a baseline, whether or not someone is feeling a symptom. These cover so many aspects of our biochemistry and our metabolic function, that it's just wonderful to have them as a baseline. Well, you look okay. Yay for you. You don't look so okay over here. Let's work on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And with the hair mineral analysis, I just want to talk about too, you talked about the P's, which can be a real problem with estrogen toxicity. But what do we know about heavy metals? And I know that the hair mineral analysis can tell you if you've got heavy metals in the system. But how does that influence estrogen toxicity? Because I have heard a little bit about how they will act on the estrogen receptors.
Yeah, we don't have a ton of information about that. Okay. But what I will say is it comes back to the conversation about all epigenetic influences, good or bad, are going to impact a woman and her hormones. All of them, anything that's affecting her. This is a layering situation. And the more layers of stress we have, the more susceptible we are to expressing a vulnerability that is maybe or maybe not genetic. Okay. So heavy metals they're just an issue for everyone also.
Yeah.
We're all exposed. Now, again, a woman may do a better job of methylating her heavy metals, getting them out of her body, excreting them, or she may do a worse job. So for me, it's always important information because they are absolutely one of the biggest blocking factors that can be present. Okay, this was another issue that I had. I had a mouthful of amalgam
Mercury.
fillings. Yeah, and had to have them slowly removed and do all of that detox as well. There's no
Wow.
question for me that was playing into my inability to deal with the estrogenic issues as well. So heavy metals are just a blocking factor. Okay. And when they are piling up in the body, they are absolutely taking up mineral space in the body. Okay. They're displacing minerals, and you need your minerals for your metabolic function, and you need your minerals as cofactors for methylation. Okay. So, and again, if there are a lot of heavy metals involved or enough to stress any person's body, you're using up the same cofactors. Okay. And if your pathways, if those pathways that are needed to break down those kinds of materials like CBS, MTHFR, okay, those are the two biggies, other ones as well. But if those pathways are genetic weak links for you, and you again don't have enough of those cofactors coming into your system to deal with the burden that is present, you will either not be able to process those toxins, those metals at all, or you will process and reprocess and reprocess, recirculate. Okay. So yeah, this is,
Yeah,
it's a major factor because
it is.
they are some of the most dangerous toxins we have, and can derail so many processes in the body. So it's definitely something to look at. And
Yeah, I agree
I
completely.
find very few women who are having these issues with estrogen toxicity not to have issues with other types of methylation and detoxification pathways.
Yeah. And there's more to it than just methylation as well. Like there's certain genetic SNPs. There's many for methylation, which I didn't know until I had my test done, my genetic test done. I was like, oh, there's so many methylation SNPs. Like you just think it's just going to be one. And I did really well with those, but my oxidation was garbage. So I have a lot of issues with oxidation. I need to take extra antioxidants to support that in me. So there's different detox pathways. It's not all just methylation. I think a lot of people focus on that, but there's more to it than that. So once again, that's yet another test that is very eye-opening, which is your genetic testing. I know this is all adds up, ladies, but it's also something that we're all dealing with, whether you like it or not. Every one of us is being exposed to these toxins. I don't even have mercury in my mouth. And my mercury was off the charts, like as high as it could go on my test. Same with lead. And it's like, where the heck did that come from? You know? So do the peas cross blood-brain barrier? Do you know?
Some do, some don't.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I know like mercury does. I don't think lead does as much, but mercury
Right.
definitely does. But I would think too, like when things are crossing the blood-brain barrier, Julie, how much is that affecting our hormone production because of its effect on the pituitary and the hypothalamus?
Well, even just the effect of the brain. Yes, and the brain is instructing the pituitary. And yeah, so this brings up another point. It is affecting things. And this is another layer of stress that a lot of people don't talk about around estrogen. But we do know that some estrogen dominance and some estrogen toxicity is also caused by testosterone aromatizing to estrogen. Okay. So you've already got your estrogen store here, and maybe you've got this weak link with being able to process your estrogens effectively. Now, oh, my testosterone isn't even functioning as testosterone, it's aromatizing to estrogen. So it's adding to the pile. The brain is, the neurons in the brain is where this happens. Okay.
Wow.
And immunity, dysfunction in the immune system, and the level of autoimmune disease that's going on,
Especially for women.
especially for women, creates something I refer to as a neuroimmune loop. Negative. It's a negative feedback loop. Okay, so you've got your organs, and you've got your immune system, functioning in your lower body. You got a vagus nerve between your brain and your organs, and emotional feedback. Also, the vagus nerve is taking. When we're overburdened with a negative immune status, this starts to be affected also. Okay. And that can add to the aromatization of testosterone.
What? Wow.
Yes, ma'am.
I didn't know that.
Ma'am. And of course, you're going to have impaired signal function going on with your glands. Okay.
Mm.
Yeah.
So does it speed up aromatization then?
It does. It increases the aromatization of testosterone. Yeah. So this is one more piece
Yes.
of why looking at all these tests is very important. Go look at a GI map, and you might get some information about your immune system that you didn't have before, right?
Yeah.
Also, obviously, in the blood that can show up. So it's hard for us as practitioners to keep saying, well, we need to look at this, we need to look at that. You never want to over test, but you want to adequately test, because we got to help women understand your body is not a set of blocks, separated and functioning separate from each other. You're like a very fine, let's say fine,
That's right.
automobile engine. You a Maserati, girl.
Exactly.
And all your parts are talking to each other or not. And so sometimes we can't resolve an estrogen problem if we don't resolve an immune problem. Okay.
Wow.
Let's talk about beta glucuronidase for a minute.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Yeah, this is where the GI map,
Yeah.
while we said it's just a great baseline test, and I'm saying it's wonderful to look at the immune system, we will often find elevated levels of beta glucuronidase on a GI map stool test when a woman is dealing with estrogen toxicity, or a man. We need to.
Yes, men for sure. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
They're right in here too, experiencing some of these problems. So beta glucuronidase is a bacterial enzyme, and it can be so it is produced by some bacteria, and it's produced sometimes the interaction of bacteria with complex carbohydrates in the gut. But when it's high in a GI map, it is a red flag that estrogens are recirculating. Beta glucuronidase will put estrogen back into the system through the epithelium. Okay. And this is another example of we may have bacterial imbalances in the gut that are causing just quiet problems. Someone might not be feeling them, right?
Yeah, you might not have gut problems.
Yeah, and it's happening. And that enzyme is unfortunately saying, seems like we need some more estrogen back in the system. So back you go, recirculating, kind of reversing glucuronidation.
Yeah, but that's
Yeah.
a big problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had mine tested. I did the GI map just for that reason. I wanted to see what's my beta-glucuronidase doing. And it was great, thankfully.
Good.
But I do
Good.
have a history like you do of a lot of hormone toxicity stuff. Like I had endometriosis. What's the connection with endometriosis and polycystic ovarian syndrome? Because my understanding is both of those are really being fed by these estrogen, these mimicking compounds that the P's.
Yes, absolutely. And sometimes they're being fed by androgenic hormones as well. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
I another connection, and I'll just speak a few minutes about nutrition here, if
Yeah,
that's okay
absolutely.
at this junction, because these particular manifestations virtually always have estrogenic connections and toxic connections, okay? But they also very frequently are connected to wrong diet for the person, too much carbohydrate, too much sugar, okay?
Yeah.
Impacting the health of those tissues. And one of the things that I see personally and believe is another contributing factor to the increase of estrogen toxicity. I mean, we're talking about all these environmental factors. Diet is another gigantic epigenetic influence. Okay. And what we have going on is a world full of what I call diet dogma. And a little while ago, we brought up, oh, if you're having hot flashes or you're having estrogen problems, you need to be on a plant-based diet. And I practice with metabolic nutrition. It is a completely personalized format. Why do we want to do that? Rather than say, oh, you should eat the Mediterranean diet, you should eat the paleo diet, you should be keto, you should be vegan, you should be this, that, or the other thing. There is no one size fits all for any person in terms of nutrition. And what we need from our nutrition is ATP production, okay? And if we need to be eating a certain way and we're eating the opposite way because diet dogma has said, oh, this is good for everyone, you're not getting ATP.
Which is energy.
That is energy. That is what the mitochondria of our cells produce in the final stage of the Krebs cycle. Mitochondrial respiration produces ATP. ATP is the gas to every single cell in your body.
It's the gas to your Maserati.
That's right. Yeah, she's got it.
Yes.
And if you don't have it, you're trying to run a Maserati like a Volkswagen. And yes, and this is a huge deal because it doesn't matter what you're asking your body to do, what you're asking it to heal, it has to have ATP, period. And if it doesn't, in its infinite wisdom, it's going to push something over there. It's going to say, I don't have the gas for that. So it just has to stay. What is the major priority with ATP? Keeping the brain, the heart, the lungs, the liver, the kidneys alive. Those are the priorities. And if that's where the energy goes, your body will shove toxins, including estrogen toxins. Okay, we don't have it. Okay,
right.
It'll push heavy metals into fat. And of course, this is something we need to bring up. Toxins equal fat. Fat
Absolutely.
equal toxins.
Yeah.
They're kissing cousins as well. Estrogen makes people fat in excess or in toxicity, and fat produces estrogen. And it just goes round and round and round, right? And the same is true of any of these other toxins, any of the P toxins we're talking about, any of the heavy metals. Your body will add fat to protect you, to protect your brain and your nervous system.
And to
right?
store all those toxins.
And to store them. And so that lack of energy, if a person is not eating according to what their body needs by way of its own individual metabolism, your body's going to start prioritizing and saying, I got this much, it's going here and here and here. So, breaking down old cells, building new cells, all of which are required to heal something, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We got to get rid of something. We got to bring on something new and fresh. All of that takes ATP. Okay. So you try to give a woman with the wrong diet a protocol to heal estrogen toxicity, and oftentimes her body's it's going to react negatively. It's going to say, sorry, can't. We're going to get backwards responses rather than, forward
Yeah.
progressive responses. And it's all because of energy. And
So
energy.
how can somebody start to figure that out? Like what kind of nutrition that they need? Where would someone start with that?
Well, they would just give me a call and we
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, there's a process to assess what that is. And I will say, again, this is about individualizing. This is not about selling a program. I'm not getting rich on writing books and selling programs that say do this, do that. It's one person at a time. And how I try to help people understand this is, you can't give an Inuit plants. They don't eat any carbohydrates, period, none. Meat and
Very
blubber.
high fat. Yeah.
Meat and blubber is it. And they have no heart disease and they have no cancer.
Yeah.
It's because that's how their bodies run and that's what they need. And it's all based upon how a person's Krebs cycle is functioning and what kind of input they need of these nutrients. So yeah, that is an important consideration for me, because I think along with the explosion of information on the internet has come a lot of bad advice.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And people utilizing the system, to reach masses with this piece of advice. Everyone needs to do this. That's just ludicrous.
It is. I agree.
You know that working with women, and yeah. every woman you're working with has a different mind body set as well.
Yeah, I've had women get very frustrated with me because they want me just to say, eat this, not that. And I even have a group coaching program where I send out a weekly meal plan. But I tell them in the first module of the program, you have got to make this your own. And they get like, I'll have, whoa, this is too many carbohydrates for me, or this is, too little carbohydrates for me, not enough calories, not enough. What about this? What about that? I heard this. Shouldn't we be fasting all the time? And I'm like, look, take this as a template to build from, because each of you, you're going to need something different. The basis of it all is, of course, you got to eat well. And that's really, that's basic. It's simple. It's like a no-brainer, right? We can tell people, like, of course, you've got to eat healthy. You've got to eat nutrient-rich foods. Obviously, eating processed foods is not good for you. Eating fast food is not good for you. Eating a boatload of sugar and inflammatory oils, not good for you. So the basics are the same no matter what diet you're looking at. And then you have to build on that. Is there something that we can eat, though, that does increase ATP? Like, is there certain foods that?
No.
Okay.
No, not as an overall recommendation.
Okay.
Why is that? Because proteins, carbohydrates, and fats feed in to the Krebs cycle at different points in different ways. They're processed differently by every person's Krebs cycle. Okay. So it requires the balance of nutrients that are right for that person. Now, what I do want to say is, women who are willing to spend the time to be very aware and take a basic map like you're sending. Okay, here's your basic map. Now go find yourself on that territory. Go find, and it's all about listening. It's about building awareness. It's about following intuition. What I teach, I give somebody the results in the beginning map, but then they've got to stay tuned and listen and respond to what the body is saying. And unfortunately, again, the world we live in is removing so much of that
Yes.
process of intuitive presence.
Yeah.
Give me the exact recipe, give me the app,
Yeah.
tell me what to put in. That is a distancing of our wholeness as women. It's a distancing of our femininity, which is openness and receiving and processing. Okay. That is a very important part of healing, and it's a very important part of eating. So while I can't say, no, there is no combination of foods or specific foods that increase ATP, it's all about getting to the right mix ratio of nutrients for how your body is metabolizing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I equate the Krebs cycle with a water wheel. Okay. It's if you dump a lot of water on it, it spins really fast and then it comes to a dead standstill, right? No energy being produced. Or if you don't put enough on, it just spins really slowly. Production of ATP is exactly the same, depending upon what you're putting in. Okay. And we're looking for that just right amount of spin. Back to Goldilocks. We want the steady stream, okay, that gets us to the most optimal production. This is a big deal because fad diets are everywhere. And how many women are you talking to who are using them?
And some of them really being harmed by them. And going back to what you were saying there about just listening to your intuition and what your body's telling you, it shocks me how many women are not doing that. And, I'll talk to women that, oh, I've been keto for 5 years and I've lost my period and I'm, 28 years old and my hair's falling out and I can't sleep and I'm super tired. I'm like, so why are you still doing keto? Oh, because it made me feel so good in the beginning.
And that is what I call the hormetic effect. Any change is going to temporarily stress your body and produce a hormetic response. Okay. Fasting is the same thing. Lots of people say, oh my God, I do a fast, I feel amazing. And then 2 weeks later, they got hormonal problems.
Yes.
Up one side and down the other. Okay. Almost any change that is significant is going to temporarily kind of wake up and stress the system and produce hormesis. And it feels good for a minute.
Yep, absolutely. Because there's a lot of stress hormones too, actually feel good. So when you're stressing your system out at first, it's like, oh, that feels good. That's a little adrenaline, dopamine, little shoot up.
There you go. There you go. But long term, it does damage. Long term, it creates problems. Yeah. And diet is no different.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of gut, I've heard you talk about SIBO before and how estrogen toxicity can influence that.
Yes. And the SIBO is a very complicated situation.
Oh my gosh, is it ever?
But one of my reflections over the years was so many SIBO clients having estrogen issues, dominance, and often toxicity.
Right.
I personally believe that is damaging to the valves in the intestines, allowing them to move the wrong way, allowing bacteria in. Okay. SIBO has, over the last years, been shown to be associated also with some of the cofactor deficiencies that we've just been talking about. Okay,
Oh,
so that's another link
yeah, yeah. Like putting the
around.
puzzle pieces together here.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
We don't,
Yeah.
yeah, again, we don't have a ton of research on this.
Hmm. But just
Um,
from your clinical experience, that's what you're
Clinical
seeing.
observation, yep, and looking at intersections, looking at several different tests and observing what's going on, kind of has provided that link. So,
Okay. So
and
let's,
often with estrogen toxicity, we just have a dysfunctional gut, period,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
We have a pileup of those specific bacteria that end up making their way into the small intestine and creating that
Creating a
condition.
lot of problems. Okay, so let's talk about detoxification because I mean, talking about all of these chemicals in our environment, from heavy metals to the P's, we're being loaded everywhere we turn.
Um,
Yet, you go to your local health food store and you pick up that, kit off the shelf that's, detox your liver in 15 days. why are those a problem? And like, how should we be properly detoxing the liver to help unburden our bodies from these chemicals?
Okay, well, you said it to me before we went on the air. I'm going to I'm going to look at any woman's pathways first and prep them for dealing with estrogen issues. That is the big deal right there. Okay, so you and I are completely like-minded there, and I know you've seen it time and time again. I see it constantly. Oh, I did this detox, I did that detox, and here I am with all these problems. It's back to what I just said about hormesis, okay, and what I said about ATP. If you push a person to heal, which is what detox kits do, okay, they provide substances that push the system to open pathways. Well, you do that in a person with a compromised pathway, they're going to get worse. There's
Yeah.
just no question about it. It may not be immediate, it may be somewhat delayed. It is inevitably going to occur, no doubt about it. So, the most important thing that your listeners can do is trust you um, to look at their pathways, to
Which
look
is
at
the Dutch test, a lot like for the
yes.
estrogen.
And you mentioned genetics. I
Mhm.
frequently rely more on biochemistry because, again, I have a horrible genetic map personally. My biochemistry is almost immaculate. So what I really care about is looking at things that tell me, again, what is the excretion pattern? Many women are under excretors. They retain, they
Mm,
recirculate. And that to me has some bearing on what they're doing emotionally in their lives, also mentally
right.
and emotionally. It all kind of fits together. So I'm going to look at the hair, I'm going to look at the blood, and I'm going to do some checking on methylation pathways to see what they're doing biochemically. Okay. Are they up to par or are they compromised? Because um, that will tell a person what needs to be done. If we're going to push, we got to be able to know that this pathway is supported, that we're getting those cofactors in and the pathway can actually function if we're asking it to do something. Okay?
Yeah.
And of course, yes, on the Dutch, we're looking specifically at the CYP and the COMT,
Yeah.
right? Wanting to know what those are doing before we start any detoxification.
Yeah, because most women will run out, they'll buy diindolylmethane, DIM, which can be great. But if you look at somebody's Dutch test, and for instance, they're doing great down their first phase 1 pathway, yet they're a horrible methylator, you give them DIM, you're going to be dumping out this estrogen.
Yep.
and not having anything to make it water soluble and take it out of the body so you can get more toxic by doing something like that. So it's really key, you guys, to hear us when we say, like, you really want to look at what your body needs, whether that's looking at your genetics, the hair mineral analysis, a Dutch test, but some testing that's going to at least tell you where you're maybe, faltering on these pathways.
Absolutely. And a lot of women are taking DIM because they think they are estrogen dominant, and DIM is going to reduce healthy estrogens. If a woman is not dominant but is toxic instead, it's dangerous. That can produce ill effects. So
Yeah.
For me, I'm always saying this: test, don't guess.
Same. I always say that too.
Don't guess. And put yourself in the hands of a pro who understands what they're looking at and what needs to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, going back to that, find the right practitioner. And this doesn't have to be me or Julie. We're not promoting ourselves here. If you find somebody else that is just as qualified, great. It's awesome. I want you to find that person.
Yeah.
But, you go to these hormone clinics and they're like slapping on or injecting your butt full of pellets and saying, see ya. And they all say, all the pellet clinics, they all recommend take DIM. Every single one of them are on DIM. And I'm like, and these are menopausal women with no estradiol. And now they're draining their estrogen farther, loading their bodies full of testosterone. And you have no idea how you're detoxing these things. Like, this is, it just drives me mad.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is a big issue because medically, and even a lot of practitioners who are, consider themselves integrative, but, might be nurse practitioners or someone like that who's doing bioidentical hormones, they are not looking at these pathways.
Yep.
They're doing saliva and blood hormone testing, and they are not looking at whether toxicity is the issue. And yes, as you say, take the DIM. It's amazing. It's good for everyone. There's nothing that's good for everyone except clean. Yeah. Back to what you were saying about food. There's one concept here: get the toxins out. Okay. And let's talk about a couple other, helpful detoxifying things to think about. So I want to bring up the topic of fish. I'm just finishing a new article about plastics and PFAS, in which there is information that this stuff is in 90% of water sources at this point. Some years ago, when I interviewed with Wendy Myers about things we're talking about, we said, well, we can avoid plastics, but we got to deal with the petrochemicals and this and that. You can't avoid them anymore. They're everywhere. And as it relates to PFAS, a representative from the Environmental Working Group recently said, one serving of fish appears to be equal to an entire month of drinking water contaminated with PFAS. One serving of fish. And plastics as well. Plastics are a huge problem because we've got microplastics in all water sources now. Okay, so filter your water. Do not be drinking municipal water. RO is the easiest for most people to get to. Reverse osmosis, it pulls out more of these toxins than any other type of filtering. You have to add minerals back to reverse osmosis water. Yeah. I drink a water if it's available to you wherever you are. I don't know if they're in Canada, but they're in a lot of places in the US. El Dorado Springs comes from outside Boulder.
Okay, and yeah.
It is processed through a couple thousand feet of sandstone. It is the best tasting, purest, most amazing water. That you can.
We don't have that here.
That you can purchase. But you got people, unfortunately, people have been told, especially if they've been told to eat a Mediterranean diet, eat fish.
Oh, I know. I was just going to say, everybody thinks they're doing themselves such a favor by eating lots of fish.
Well, and we used to think that, fatty ocean fish and mercury was the only problem, and it's not. Now we have these two major problems in our fish, PFAS and microplastics. And the fish in the ocean are, they're consuming each other, and they're consuming fish meal that's all full of this stuff now too. Using and this is a this is a helpful suggestion. We do still need to know, obviously, if an individual tolerates, and we need to oftentimes look at the stool, at the gut function. But butyrate, which is high in ghee, which is clarified butter, is something that is quite helpful for moving a bunch of these fat soluble toxins out of the tissues and detoxifying them. This is a kind of a simple inclusion that a lot of people can make if they tolerate. Coffee enemas with binders can be helpful.
What
Because
binders in them? Like in the enema itself?
No,
Oh, okay.
taken internally. I
Oh, so
always
like
say,
charcoal or yeah.
anytime you do an enema, or a sauna is another recommendation that I'm going to make here, because sauna is amazing for detoxifying a lot of these heavy compounds and fat soluble compounds that the body isn't breaking down on its own, heavy metals as well. Okay. Taking a binder with any of these detox processes, because these are hormetic, they are stimulatory, they are going to mobilize toxins. If you have compromise in your pathways, you need to support that with some binding. It's like a hall pass.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you mostly use charcoal, or do you like other binders?
I like all kinds, and I'm always looking at people's test results, for which ones are best. If you have lead in a hair test, you have to move lead before you can move mercury. And to pick up lead, I use Pectisol, citrus pectin. Okay, you got to go through a stretch of time of getting lead out first, and then work on mercury. But no, I love zeolite, chlorella. I say always take chlorella if you are eating fish. But love zeolite, love citrus pectin, love. I use oftentimes. We haven't talked about mold, but mold is a big estrogen stimulator. I use bamboo charcoal in that circumstance, which is fantastic. Bentonite is also really important for certain situations. So yeah, no, they're all good. They all have different applications, but yeah, these are some simple practices that people can use, other than just starting to eliminate the sources, where this stuff is coming into their bodies.
Yeah. And do you do gallbladder flushes? Are you a proponent of that?
Only when someone is really healthy,
Okay.
really capable of
I used to do
tolerating.
them a long
Yeah.
time ago. They're the nastiest thing ever, but I used to do them. So
Yeah.
yeah, you got to drink
Well,
olive oil and it's so gross.
yeah, it has a place. It
Okay.
absolutely has a place. But the better thing to do always on a regular basis is just keep cleaning. And the best thing for the gallbladder is to keep the bile smooth and flowing. Okay. Coffee enemas are very helpful for taking away sticky tar-like bile at the duct, and smoothing out and increasing bile. Bile comes as a fat emulsifier, right? When we eat, it comes out of the gallbladder. It's delivered straight into the small intestine, right? To help emulsify fat, break it down. But the liver stores a certain percentage of toxins in the bile. It's one of the ways that the liver has become adaptive to all these toxins is, here, take some of this, put it in the gut, get rid of it with the food. Problem is, if it gets overburdened and sticky and, too full of toxins, and the bile is not coming out smoothly, and it's also not, a person is not excreting, tend to be more of a recycler, then it's problematic. So I like supporting the liver and the gallbladder through all of what we're talking about, including with estrogen toxicity on a regular basis.
Yeah.
But that needs to be individual to the person. Okay?
Yes. Yeah.
And yeah. But the enemas can be quite helpful on that front.
Are gallstone attacks a sign that your gallbladder isn't function like that maybe you do have some of that going on? Yeah. I just had a gallbladder attack.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I know. I think that's what it was. It kind of lined up with what the symptoms were. And I was like, how is that possible? I've been so healthy and I just do so well with my, like, I haven't drank for 15 years. I'm like super clean. And I'm like, how is this possible? But yeah. So now I'm like diving into all things gallstone, trying to figure out, geez, why would this happen to somebody that's a healthy person? But maybe it's toxins.
Most likely would be my
Mhm.
guess. And yeah,
Yeah, I'm doing lots to support it now.
good.
Bitters, and I'm going to do the coffee enemas. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. I need to go get some cleaner coffee. I'm drinking Starbucks right now. So I thought, I don't want to put that up my butt. I think it's
No,
probably got some toxins in it in and of
no.
itself.
It does. I'm going to put you
Ah.
on some good coffee sources.
Yeah, exactly. I'm ashamed. I like my
Uh,
Starbucks, but okay, Julie, I could just sit here and pick your brain. You're so smart and so lovely. And I love all of this stuff. I could just talk about it for hours. So I think to sum everything up, test, don't guess, ladies. You've heard me say this so many times. And don't willy-nilly your hormones. Like if you're going to do hormone replacement therapy, know that this really needs to be part of um, that protocol. You really do. I think every single woman could benefit from supporting her liver, her gallbladder, her gut, her stress. I mean, we didn't even get into the mind body stuff, which I'm super into that as well, Julie. I mean, we were both practitioners and we know, like, body work practitioners, and we know how much our mind and our feelings and emotions have to do with what's going on in our body and um,
we'll do
illness.
that another day.
Another day, Julie. I'm
Another
gonna have to have
day.
you back. But I just want to say thank you. And so you have an active practice. I'm going to link to her website in the show notes, but you do work one-on-one with people all over the world, don't you?
I do. Yes. Yes. It's my passion. It's what I care about is one soul and body at a time.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I mean, I write I write in my community and share, general information, but my passion is um, because I was so sick, and there was a
Yeah.
lot of trauma and stress in my life during the time that I was sick. And I just, the joy of seeing someone get their worth and their peace and their health, all back in one place is what it's all about for me. So
Mhm. And I
yeah.
feel like, don't you feel like women going through perimenopause and menopause, we're just having such a hard time, like harder than I think it's ever been in the history of the
Yeah.
world, like because of the toxic load. And women, we're seeing this epidemic proportion of women getting weight loss resistance, and they're doing everything right, they're eating well, they're exercising, they're
Yep.
detoxing, and yet they're not letting go of this fat. And I think so much of it has to do with this toxic load that we're
And
exposed
stress.
to, and stress.
Yeah, the amount of what we expect of ourselves and what culture expects of us, and the stress to perform and to always have it, pulled together, if you will. And even these conversations can push that button, oh, well, here's something else I need to get just right. Well, we're going to give you the best information, but in the end, it's all about relaxing and just the commitment and taking it all in and beginning to move it through who we are and what we need, in a very respectful and loving kind of a way.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Very well said. And I'm going to leave it there, everybody. I'm going
Mhm.
to link to everything so you can go find Julie. And if you're interested in working with her, you can go head over to her website. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show. I appreciate the conversation and I look forward to having you back again.
Thank you, Karen. It's been awesome to be with you.